Kan market itu tidak harus bull market atau bear market sih teman-teman.
Oke.
Bisa aja sideways aja terus.
Bicara
Untuk retail masuk 100M di untuk retail masuk 100M di saham FCA ini agak gila.
Setelah sukses dengan smartphone,
Gue tuh inget tim tadi.
Kembali lagi dengan saya Kali Mas Ada, dan hari ini secara spesifik kita akan membahas video dengan judul ya, cara mencari the next Aster. Bagaimana mengidentifikasi asymmetric bet di market crypto. Kita tahu Aster salah satu aset yang naik lebih dari 10 kali lipat semenjak di-seal oleh Changpeng Zhao, salah satu founder dari centralized exchange paling besar di dunia. Dan kita sempat bahas ini juga untuk member Akademi Crypto yang ada di dalam. Jadi kalau teman-teman pengen bergabung ke komunitas gratis kita, bisa klik link Discord di bawah. Ini pun juga sempat kita bahas di live margin call, dan teman-teman yang ikut ya waktu itu di 0,6 pasti udah cuan lebih ya dari 3 kali lipat, 300% free call buat teman-teman yang di luar, dan itu hanya sebagian kecil apa yang kita lakukan di dalam. Nah, hari ini kita akan membedah ya teman-teman secara spesifik, secara objektif, gimana sih caranya mencari the next Aster. Kira-kira kalau kita punya portofolio ya, mau dialokasiin ke beberapa aset altcoin, gimana sih cara cari aset yang naik berkali-kali lipat, meskipun play seperti Aster ini once in a lifetime atau once in a cycle play, tapi kita pun juga harus siap ya mengidentifikasi pola-pola dan juga kecenderungan-kecenderungan yang lain yang akan disodorkan ke kita di masa yang akan datang. Jadi jangan sampai teman-teman ketika nanti ada opportunity baru seperti Aster, teman-teman missing out karena nggak siap. Nah, kita akan membahas cara mencari Aster, tapi kita akan membahas dua hal dulu yang menurut saya paling penting di sini. Pertama itu adalah memahami konsep asymmetric bet, dan dua, menggunakan ya pendekatan contrarian thinking. Nah, kita di sini kalau mau mencari return yang anomali, return yang di atas dari Bitcoin, kita itu mencari yang namanya alpha. Aster ini juga alpha. Dalam artian ketika teman-teman bisa mengambil peluangnya dengan cepat, oke, dengan size yang besar dan positioning yang oke, teman-teman ini akan bisa capturing opportunity dan memperoleh keuntungan di market. Jadi apa sih sebenarnya asymmetric bet itu? Jadi asymmetric bet itu merupakan suatu positioning ketika kita mengambil suatu trade atau kita mengambil suatu posisi yang mana potensi upside-nya atau potensi kenaikannya itu jauh lebih tinggi, berkali-kali lipat ya, berlipat-lipat ganda dibanding potensi kerugian yang mungkin kita dapatkan. Jadi kerugiannya bisa kita batasi dengan position sizes yang oke, dengan menerapkan stop loss ya, tapi potensi upside-nya atau kenaikannya itu jauh lebih tinggi daripada potensi kerugian atau downside yang bisa kita dapatkan. Jadi asymmetric bet itu misalkan kalau kita kehilangan itu kita bisa hanya kehilangan 1, tapi kalau kita bisa profit, kita bisa dapat profit 10. Sama seperti Aster. Misalkan waktu itu kita positioning dan beli 1 juta rupiah. Kalau misalkan waktu itu Aster tidak perform, jumlah maksimal yang kita loss itu juga 1 juta ya. Kalau tiba-tiba itu tweetnya Zizi di prank, atau misalkan itu paid seal, atau misalkan itu mungkin di hack ya, maksimal potensi kita kehilangan di posisi yang kita masukkan itu 1 juta. Tapi kita lihat ya, upside potensialnya Aster itu waktu itu lebih dari 10 kali lipat, dan teman-teman bisa cuan lebih dari 10 juta, sementara potensi kerugian atau loss-nya itu hanya di 1 juta. Nah, asymmetric bet di market crypto itu bisa teman-teman temukan ya. Kalau kita ngomong kenapa di sini di new ya, banyak sekali teman-teman token-token, koin-koin di market crypto itu yang selalu catching the beats ketika dia adalah project yang baru. Saya selalu bilang teman-teman, konsep di sebelumnya ya, new coin, new naratif ya, new play itu selalu disukai ya, 3N ini oleh para smart money. Karena gak hanya smart money, kita pun ada kecenderungan suka dengan barang yang baru. Jadi kalau teman-teman mau ngomongin asymmetric bet di market, itu juga harus berfokus ke koin-koin baru. Jangan kamu ngomongin oke ini koin yang udah ada dari tahun 2018, ini alpha. Jawabannya enggak. Ada chance besar koin-koin, token-token tersebut tidak akan lagi melihat all time high yang baru. Jadi teman-teman harus paham bahwa itu harus teman-teman cari ya, atau teman-teman harus mengarah ke sana. New coins, new opportunity di new market. Nah, ini sebagai contoh ya teman-teman, penerapan dari asymmetric bet. Saya selalu ngomongin sizing yang ini udah berkali-kali maksimal ketika kita punya slot ya untuk altcoin, itu 1/10 ya, atau 10% dari maksimal slot yang kita pakai. Misalkan kita ini punya $1.000 untuk berinvestasi di altcoin, dan maksimal nih satu koin itu $100 ketika kita masuk, dan misalkan yang perform hanya satu yang jadi Aster kemarin, dia udah bisa cuan ya lebih dari $1.000. Jadi kalau 9 yang lainnya ini rugi atau 9 yang lainnya ini nggak perform, teman-teman tetap mendapatkan apresiasi keuntungan ya, karena satu ini bisa menutup ya semua kerugian yang ada. Jadi itu adalah konsep ketika teman-teman mau menerapkan yang namanya asymmetric bet atau asymmetric opportunity. Nah, misalkan ya ada satu yang naik 20 kali lipat, dari $100 ini jadi $2.000 dan 9 lain ya yang nggak perform yang minus 900 itu teman-teman dapetin 1.100 profit. Jadi teman-teman harus paham bahwa di market itu nggak semuanya itu mengalami keuntungan. Ada juga ya rekomendasi yang teman-teman dapetin dari watchlist dan lain sebagainya itu tidak perform, hanya satu yang outperforms everything dan itu happens a lot juga di dalam market. Jadi teman-teman harus paham bahwa hedge fund pun ini juga memiliki konsep yang sama ya. Ini kalau kita ngomong Easy Labs yang sebelumnya itu adalah Binance Labs, ini bisa ya teman-teman lihat di website chain broker dan teman-teman lihat apa aja sih yang mereka investasikan. Mereka ini juga nggak semuanya perform ya teman-teman. Kalau di sini lihat hanya satu Aster yang hijau dari 7 hari terakhir, Sui merah, Ethena merah, Aptos merah, Celestia merah. Jadi memang hanya satu yang perform, itu bisa menutup semua yang tidak perform. Itu pun juga cara barbell strategi yang diterapkan oleh berbagai hedge fund di dunia. Jadi mereka pun juga paham ya teman-teman, sulit yang mencari alpha di market, itulah mengapa mereka menerapkan strategi yang namanya diversifikasi. Nah, selanjutnya kita akan membahas mengenai pendekatan kontrarian untuk mencari alpha di market. Jadi pada dasarnya ya menemukan alpha, ini kita ngomongin higher return dan juga risk yang lebih rendah. Kita pengennya dengan kita menemukan alpha di market, kita memperoleh potensi return yang jauh lebih tinggi, sementara risknya atau risikonya itu bisa jauh lebih kecil. Jadi seringkali ya tolak ukurnya itu adalah berapa banyak ya profit yang kita peroleh dan juga berapa besar ya risiko yang kita korbankan. Dan kadangkala ya teman-teman untuk menjadi seorang kontrarian sejati itu teman-teman harus benar-benar berani melawan sentimen pasar. Biasanya kalau kebanyakan orang itu bullish, market itu koreksi. Kalau kebanyakan orang bearish, market itu tiba-tiba naik ya. Jadi melawan orang banyak itu adalah hal yang bisa teman-teman lakukan kalau teman-teman itu mau menjadi seorang kontrarian. Asalkan harus didukung data, fakta, dan angka. Jangan tiba-tiba semua orang bullish karena memang datanya itu mengatakan ini bullish, tapi kamu berpikir kontrarian. Enggak, semua orang pasti salah, tapi tanpa ada data, fakta, dan juga angka yang membacking omongan kamu tersebut, itu sama aja bohong. Ya, jadi teman-teman harus paham, kontrarian boleh, tapi harus didukung dengan data, fakta, dan juga angka. Oke? Dan sama seperti Warren Buffett, ya Warren Buffett pun juga selalu menerapkan yang namanya margin of safety. Beliau itu suka sekali membeli saat murah, dan juga menjual ketika semuanya ini hype. Disitulah beliau ini memperoleh banyak sekali keuntungan. Jadi beliau ini suka sesuatu yang tidur, ya, yang under value, ya, di bawah margin of safety, dia merasa aman membeli, dan kemudian ketika semua orang udah ada di dalam, baru dia melakukan yang namanya penjualan. Jadi teman-teman harus paham, beli saat murah, jual saat hype. Nah, sama juga ya studi kasus kontrarian. Dulu ketika institusi besar belum ada di sini, mereka tuh selalu ngomongin negatif tentang kripto, ngomongin negatif tentang Bitcoin. Ya, kita ngomong CEO JP Morgan, CEO BlackRock bilang Bitcoin itu hanya batu, ya Bitcoin itu sampah, ya Bitcoin bubble dan lain sebagainya. Tapi sekarang ketika harganya tinggi dan mereka perusahaannya yang udah memiliki exposure di Bitcoin, mereka bilang Bitcoin adalah masa depan, ya. Bitcoin adalah the next ya future of money. Bitcoin akan ke $1 juta. Disitulah sebagai seorang kontrarian sejati kita harus berpikir, kenapa dulu kok kamu nggak suka ketika barang ini under value dan ketika sekarang relatif overvalue, kenapa kalian malah suka? Itu harus menjadi suatu pertanyaan yang sangat objektif di pikiran kita. Berarti memang mereka ini selalu bergerak sesuai dengan ya apa yang dipikirkan oleh para retail. Jadi retail itu suka sesuatu yang overvalue, sesuatu yang sangat terlambat, dan mereka berharap ya bisa seizing opportunity untuk menjual ya ketika semua orang ini sedang dalam rasa yang serakah. Oke? Dan kita akan membahas ya bagaimana strategi hedge fund ini juga untuk mencari potensi alpha di market. Oke? Pertama kita ngomongin ya rumus kesuksesan dari hedge fund. Pertama mereka itu tidak melihat harga, mereka itu melihat fundamental. Siapa sih tim pengembangnya? Utilitas proyeknya untuk apa? Teknologinya seperti apa? Tokenomicsnya bagus atau buruk? Komunitasnya gimana? Mereka tuh nggak lihat harga. Selama matriks fundamentalnya itu masih oke, mereka akan terus berinvestasi pada altcoin tersebut. Begitu juga sebaliknya. Kalau misalkan fundamentalnya semua jelek, ya harganya pun murah, mereka juga nggak akan mau beli. Kemudian mereka pun untuk mendukung analisa fundamentalnya, mereka juga menganalisa on-chain sangat mendalam, ya total value lock, berapa banyak aset yang ada di dalam protokol, kemudian berapa banyak ya wallet aktifnya dan juga pertumbuhan tokennya itu seperti apa, selalu mereka analisa. Dan mereka juga selalu menyukai ya yang namanya mispricing dan juga inefisiensi. Dimana ketika ada aset yang TVL-nya gede tapi harganya masih relatif murah ya, atau misalkan market cap-nya ya teman-teman itu masih kecil sementara TVL-nya besar, mereka juga bisa melihat oh ini mispricing, harusnya dia dihargai lebih tinggi. Jadi hedge fund juga melihat ya kira-kira apa sih yang cocok untuk kita beli sekarang. Dan selanjutnya ya mereka suka sekali ya networking dan juga mencari informasi, apalagi kalau misalkan mereka itu pengennya ya masuk sebelum project itu ada di market. Jadi di dalam ya mereka itu membuat suatu formasi ya untuk bisa memperoleh berbagai token-token tersebut di harga ya sebelum listing di centralized exchange. Dan selanjutnya hampir semua strategi hedge fund yang saya breakdown 60-80% portofolio mereka itu di Bitcoin. Karena apa? Karena mereka tahu itu yang hanya akan naik ya dalam jangka panjang. Bahkan sedikit sekali yang punya exposure besar di Ethereum. Nah, jadi mostly 60-80% di Bitcoin. Baru sisanya ya dari portofolionya itu untuk stablecoin dan juga altcoin. Jadi begitu ya cara mainnya hedge fund. Kalau kamu juga memiliki cara yang sama ya, kamu itu juga udah sesuai ya dengan cara hedge fund ya. Core satellite strategy yang udah saya bilang ke teman-teman itu juga patut untuk diperhitungkan. Mencari the next big thing seperti kita mencari Aster itu memang tidak ada sesuatu yang pasti. Ada kombinasi seni dan juga sains. Yang mana banyak ya analisa teknikal, fundamental, ya, indikator sentimen. Tapi teman-teman harus bisa capturing that moment in the right time, in the right place, with the right size. Karena percuma juga kalau teman-teman, oke, this is the next big thing, tapi kayak, wah bener nggak ya? Terus masuknya ragu, posisinya itu 10% daripada dia seharusnya. Itu bisa menyebabkan ya teman-teman underexposed ke dalam suatu play yang mengalami kenaikan yang signifikan. Dan saya nggak mau itu terjadi ke teman-teman. Jadi gimana? Mengidentifikasi asymmetric opportunity di market crypto. Pertama, selalu pantau tren dan sektor baru. Kita tahu ya 2020 geger dulu DeFi, decentralized finance, yang mana dianggap ya bisa menggantikan bank dan lain sebagainya. Karena waktu itu ya semuanya COVID, kemudian ada tren NFT di 2021 dengan metaverse, gaming dan lain sebagainya. Oke. Lalu tren berubah ya teman-teman di 2023 ya layer 1 mengalami kenaikan dan lain sebagainya. Jadi teman-teman harus bisa spotting opportunity. Kalau sekarang mungkin dua ya teman-teman. Sektor yang harus teman-teman perhatikan, pertama itu adalah sektor stablecoins. Kenapa? Karena growth-nya itu sangat tinggi. Dan sekarang ya Alpha saying bahwa banyak sekali blockchain yang dibangun khusus ya untuk transfer stablecoin dan juga utilize stablecoin. Jadi stablecoin naratif adalah naratif yang harus kita perhatikan sekarang. Dan yang kedua, oke, teman-teman harus memperhatikan narasi PERP DEX ya, atau Perpetual Decentralized Exchange. Yang mana udah ada ya sebenarnya dari zaman DYDX dan lain sebagainya, IFO. Cuman mereka ini nggak capturing better than Hyperliquid. Jadi Hyperliquid itu punya komunitas, punya jaringan, punya produk yang benar-benar seamless. Okay? Dan dorongan dari komunitas itu yang creating a lot of demands. Dan sekarang setelah munculnya Aster, teman-teman bisa lihat bahwa saya ngomong ini marketnya udah mulai menjenuh ya. Jadi my key takeaway untuk beberapa bulan ke depan saya melihat Aster ini akan mengalahkan Hyperliquid karena kita tahu tingginya ya ego dari Changpeng Zhao yang mana dia udah sukses di centralized exchange. Saya ngomong dia akan pengen ya sukses di centralized exchange, dia akan salip Hyperliquid secara market cap dan itu yang saya lihat terjadi. Tapi setelah itu, ini sudah mulai jenuh ya. Kalau kemarin banyak rumor juga ya, SBF ya founder dari FTX dulu, beliau ini nge-tweet ya dari dalam jeruji besi GM ya, good morning. Saya rasa ya beliau ini juga gatel nih lihat Battle of the Perpetual Decentralized Exchange dan saya rasa itu udah ya dalam artian pasti akan ada narasi yang baru. Jadi saya akan melihat narasi stablecoin dan ya even ketika kita memasuki bear market pun narasi stablecoin itu akan menjadi narasi yang sangat amat seksi. Oke? Jadi sometimes ya, contoh pada DEX, kamu nggak perlu jadi yang pertama, kamu hanya perlu ya jadi yang kedua, tapi lebih mempesona. Nah, itu rumusnya kalau kamu mau dilihat oleh market. Karena sekarang pun, ya Aster pun juga udah mengalahkan Hyperliquid in terms of volume and revenue. Ya, 9 juta USD revenue dalam waktu 1 hari. Setelah listing, ya tidak begitu lama. That's the power of KOL, ya, atau Key Opinion Leader. Kalau teman-teman ngomong, Changpeng Zhao ini punya duit yang banyak, punya influence yang gede. Dia bisa move the market dan ya, let's see. Oke? Nah, selanjutnya, berbagai big player itu juga memiliki screening tools yang oke. Ya. Pertama, kalau mau lihat new listing, yang saya ngomong ke teman-teman, biasanya alpha itu selalu ada di new listing. Teman-teman bisa pakai CoinMarketCap, CoinGecko yang melihat bagian recently added untuk melihat gimana sih ya, token-token apa sih yang baru aja, ya listing, saya bisa beli, dan lain sebagainya. Selanjutnya teman-teman ya bisa menggunakan DEX tools, ya DEX Screener, ya, agregator DEX lain, untuk melihat ya biasanya pair-pair awal yang bisa luncur di DEX. Ya. Karena sebelumnya ya Aster, yaitu namanya juga APX ya, origin contract dari Aster, yang mana dia juga udah live juga ya di jaringan BSC. Nah, selanjutnya teman-teman juga bisa melihat ya media sosial dan juga sentimen ya. Twitter atau X is the best place ya to get alpha. Dan teman-teman juga bisa pakai Lunar Crush, sentimen, Kaito untuk kurasi ya berbagai informasi dari Twitter. Tapi kalau teman-teman nggak punya tools tersebut ya nyalain notifikasi di Twitter dan juga bookmarking ya a lot of alpha itu juga bisa menjadi sesuatu yang cukup menarik untuk dilakukan. Selanjutnya on-chain alert ya ada whale alerts yang bisa teman-teman maksimalkan ya untuk melihat kira-kira gimana ya akumulasi token yang terjadi oleh para pemain besar. Selanjutnya teman-teman bisa melakukan analisa fundamental karena ingat ya smart money itu nggak melihat harga, mereka melihatnya fundamental. Oke, pertama bisa teman-teman melakukan analisa fundamental singkat. Ya pertama, lakukan penilaian ya, baca white papernya, lihat websitenya, kira-kira project ini ngapain. Karena banyak sekali teman-teman di sini yang membeli altcoin nggak ngerti itu layer 1, layer 2 atau meme coin. Karena banyak yang ngomongin saya beli. Apa bisa cuan? Bisa. Cuman apakah kamu tenang dengan membeli sesuatu yang tidak kamu ketahui meskipun kamu cuan ya. Jadi intinya ini bukan hanya tentang cuan, tapi mengerti apa yang kamu lakukan dan lakukan apa yang kamu mengerti. Jangan kebalikannya. Oke? Lihat cek tim ya sama seperti The old man saying, ya orang itu berinvestasi pada orang, bukan pada barang. Kalau orangnya bagus, barangnya pasti bagus. Lihat projectnya dulu seperti apa, jangan orang ini udah pernah gagal dengan project terus kamu mau invest ya. Hati-hati dengan orang yang pernah gagal dengan project. Lihat tokenomics-nya, teman-teman harus pahami juga, oke? Bagaimana ya distribusi token dan lain sebagainya, supply dan lain sebagainya, itu juga hal yang sangat harus teman-teman perhatikan. Selanjutnya ya lihat komunitas ya aktif atau enggak. Di Twitter gimana ya jaringannya meningkat atau enggak ya orang yang pakai, dan itu sangat penting untuk teman-teman lakukan. Nah, selanjutnya teman-teman bisa melakukan check on katalis dan juga momentum. Jadi teman-teman bisa melihat ya, momentum itu diciptakan oleh banyak hal. Sama seperti Aster yang diciptakan momentumnya oleh CZ, dan akhirnya semua orang di komunitas kejar ya, harganya naik terus, dikejar terus. Dan ada beberapa katalis dan momentum yang bisa teman-teman perhatikan. Pertama, apakah ada fitur baru? Sama seperti Aster kemarin, akhirnya dia juga confirm ya bahwa kita akan lakukan buyback dan kita akan luncurin ya teman-teman sebuah jaringan layer 1 ya untuk mereka bisa bridging money dengan lebih oke ya. Selanjutnya pun mereka juga akan ada ya mobile version. Bayangkan ini hal yang bahkan Hyperliquid pun sampai sekarang urung lakukan. Jadi teman-teman juga harus melihat ya ada katalis positif yang ada di market. Dia juga akan listing di bursa besar ya, bursanya CZ, teksnya CZ juga belum listing, oke. Kemitraan strategis, kemarin juga ada partnership dengan Trust Wallet, oke, dukungan influencer otomatis ya karena CZ nge-tweet semuanya jadi ikut ke sini. Selanjutnya lihat ya momentum harganya seperti apa. Selanjutnya teman-teman, evaluasi risk to reward karena risk to reward does really matter yang saya ngomong ya. Sama seperti ya di sini contoh ya atau evaluasi risk to rewardnya, misalkan token saat ini market cap 50 juta. Kalau kamu masuk dan sukses naik 10 kali ke 500 juta, kamu akan 10x. Tapi kalau gagal ya anggap aja itu kan 0. Ya, misalkan token saat ini ya kamu masukin misalkan $100, dia naik 10 kali lipat jadi $1.000. $100 gagal ya, kamu bisa rugi $50 sampai $100. Ini risk to reward 1:10. Jadi asymmetric bet itu bukan tentang hanya kamu trading, ya mencet tombol, ngatur leverage. Tapi memiliki risk to reward ya framework di dalam kepala kalian untuk mengetahui kira-kira ini aset bakal kemana naiknya. Nah selanjutnya kita akan membahas lebih dalam mengenai positioning ya, sizing dan juga manajemen risiko. Jadi banyak orang yang di sini gagal dengan manajemen risiko. Misalkan kemarin, oke, saya mau all in Aster ya, CZ nge-tweet semua duitnya dimasukin. Kalau itu benar ya memang duitmu 10 kali lipat kekayaanmu. Tapi kalau itu salah tiba-tiba di-hack, kamu kehilangan semua kekayaan yang kamu miliki. Jadi saya nggak pernah setuju dengan orang yang bisa bilang ya all in dan lain sebagainya, ya cacing-cacing naga-naga. I personally disagree. Kenapa? Karena nggak semua orang cocok dengan style tersebut dan nggak akan semua orang itu rela ya kehilangan significant amount of the wealth yang mereka create dengan susah payah. Jadi mereka harus benar-benar memiliki framework risk to reward yang bagus. Pertama ya, batasi exposure ya bet yang kamu pasang. 1-5% dari total portofolio yang kamu miliki, it's a very good ya, untuk mencari potensi alpha. Let's say kamu 5% masuk Aster. Aster naik 10 kali lipat, 50%. Itu udah ngalahin return Bitcoin di tahun ini. Ya, jadi teman-teman harus paham. Sizing does mean a lot of things. Oke, selanjutnya lihat diversifikasi. Jangan semua taruh di Aster. Lihat juga project-project yang lain. Karena apa? Karena kalau kamu nggak melakukan diversifikasi dan Aster nggak perform, kamu akan cenderung mengalami yang namanya kerugian. Selanjutnya atur stop loss. Saya suka kalau alpha play, stop loss saya itu sebesar posisi yang saya masukkan. Misalkan ya, saya masuk Aster 10M. Saya nggak cut loss ketika dia turun ke 5M. Ya, saya anggap 10M itu jumlah saya cut loss-nya. Ya, seperti itu yang harus teman-teman pahami. Selanjutnya ambil profit ya secara bertahap. Oke, realisasikan keuntungan kalau dia naik. Nggak ada salahnya, saya juga moonback Aster ketika dia naik 2X. Saya jual ya 100%. Karena saya nggak ngerti ya dia bakal naik terus atau enggak ya. Jadi itu penting untuk dilakukan dan sekarang ketika dia terus naik ya saya masih memperoleh yang namanya keuntungan. Selanjutnya evaluasi portofolio secara berkala. Kira-kira masih bisa hold lebih lama atau enggak. Oke. Ini ada beberapa studi kasus ya asymmetric bet yang berbuah keuntungan miliaran. Oke, ini contoh ya, dulu banyak sekali ya orang yang menganggap ya, Shiba Inu koin yang ya hanya viral-viralan, tapi banyak juga ya dulu janitor atau pekerja kebersihan di New York ini invest $8.000 dan menjadi 5,7 billion ya, kekayaan tiba-tiba jadi ratusan. Oke, ratusan T ya. Bayangkan ya 100 T dari hanya duit ratusan juta. It was wild ya waktu itu. Saya pun juga kaya dari Shiba Inu. Ya, let's be real. Ya, itu juga salah satu jumpstart kenapa saya juga bisa di sini. Ya, saya tidak menampik fakta adanya keberuntungan. Yes. It means a lot ya. Luck itu it means a lot. Tapi balik lagi ya, saya punya framework di pikiran saya. Waktu itu pun saya juga hanya masuk $100. Saya melihat risk to rewardnya ini bisa naik 10 kali lipat. Oke, itulah mengapa ya saya invest hanya $100 dari modal saya yang waktu itu hanya 120 juta setelah berkembang ya dari 30 juta aja. Selanjutnya teman-teman juga harus lihat ya portfolio, pendekatan itu sangat penting, riset juga sangat penting, tools dan sumber daya itu bisa teman-teman maksimalkan untuk mencari the next big things. Kita pun tidak ya terafiliasi, kita hanya menggunakan berbagai project ini. Untuk website, analisis dan agregator ya teman-teman bisa pakai CoinMarketCap, CoinGecko, Devi Lama untuk lihat TVL, ya, active user dan lain sebagainya. CoinMarketCap, CoinGecko ini basic crypto data untuk lihat website, white paper, harga dan juga chart. Nah, selanjutnya untuk on-chain ya teman-teman bisa pakai Glassnode, Sentiment, Dune, dan Mesari ini cenderung untuk riset-riset ya, tapi menurut saya Delphi Digital risetnya itu lebih up to date. Selanjutnya sosial media ya, pakai X, Telegram, Reddit, atau platform berita yang lain, teman-teman juga bisa pakai Akademi Kripto. Dan kita juga selalu ya teman-teman kasih berita gratis harian ke teman-teman setiap hari. Jadi klik ya link Discord di bawah untuk teman-teman dapetin berita setiap hari. Selanjutnya ada kalender event ya, Coin Market Call ya. Di sini kelihatan nih teman-teman setiap minggu ya ada apa, setiap bulan ada apa, bisa teman-teman ya di sini gunakan ya katalisnya. Nah, selanjutnya ya screening kriteria sendiri ya, teman-teman misalkan punya cara sendiri, saya maunya beli ya kalau market cap di bawah 50 juta ya, TVL-nya minimal harus sekian, komunitasnya harus sekian. Itu juga preferensi yang bisa teman-teman bangun sendiri dengan ya menggunakan tools-tools yang kita omongin tadi. Oke, jadi kesimpulannya apa? Untuk bisa ya mencari the next aster, mencari alpha di market, memaksimalkan ya asymmetric opportunity atau asymmetric bet. Pertama ya, untuk mencari aster ya, yang selanjutnya teman-teman harus berfokus ke asymmetric bet. Teman-teman lihat sesuatu yang risikonya minim tapi potensi upside-nya tinggi. Oke, jangan sampai kamu mikir seperti ini. Oke, saya rela posisi ini hilang semua, tapi potensi naiknya itu hanya 50%. Yaitu bukan risk to reward 1:10, yaitu risk to reward 1:0,5. Nah, itu sangat buruk. Jadi selalu berpikir, ini bisa naik 10 kali lipat nggak? Ya, waktu itu yang dipikirkan, oke ini si Z punya centralized exchange yang paling gede, dia nge-tweet, ini bisa jadi saingannya hyperliquid, ya valuasi Aster segini, hyperliquid segini. Oke, itu teman-teman bisa melihat, oke ini asymmetric opportunity. Saya mau sizing in di sini. Selanjutnya ya, sangat penting ya untuk teman-teman menerapkan yang namanya portfolio sizing. Jangan oke ini bisa naik 10 kali lipat tapi semua uangmu kamu masukin dan tiba-tiba dia nggak perform. Banyak yang seperti itu, banyak sekali. Oke. Selanjutnya ya teman-teman harus ya ada sedikit nyali ya untuk sedikit ya contrarian thinking karena waktu itu juga banyak yang food ya atau fear, uncertainty and doubt. Mereka ya selalu bilang ya hal negatif ketika dia launching dan itu yang harus teman-teman lawan ya pakai kepala dingin, pakai perhitungan yang matang. Jadi itu ya cara teman-teman untuk mencari the next aster. Semoga video ini bermanfaat dan fokus on asymmetric bet. Saya Kali Mas Sada. Sampai berjumpa di video selanjutnya.
Makin membingungkan kita melawan sahabat kita yang dengki kepada kita itu Rinko dalam.
My work is easy because I use ClickUp. Here's how I keep track of all my tasks. I start by brain dumping everything I need to get done in a list view. Next, I set a priority and a due date to keep things on track. I create custom statuses to organize my progress exactly how I want it. I like to add the action items field so AI can show me the next steps. I add my teammates as watchers so they're in the loop. ClickUp makes work easy, from personal projects to running a multi-billion-dollar company. Click the link below to create your workspace for free.
Ya elah bang, game triple M masih aja ladenin yang caper-caper, sebut nama. Ngapain sebut nama? Langsung aja mulai. Gue udah penasaran sama alur ceritanya, kata Ilham. Alright then. Kalau begitu teman-teman ya. Oke, let's do.
Hai semua, kali ini aku mau bikin donat labu yang sekarang lagi rame banget. Dan ternyata donat labu ini memang enak ya, empuk dan juga lembut. Bahkan lebih lembut dari donat kentang. Aku suka sih sama donat labu ini karena
Asia's role in global supply chain allows it to influence the transition in ways that many other regions cannot.
All the companies that I have been talking to they have not stopped the work of looking through their supply chains with ESG in mind because that is just where the puck is going.
Our focus is really to understand what are the technologies that are part of our portfolio for the future and scaling those technologies so that we can meet our demand with clean energy.
Resiliency is just not an operational response to what is happening out there. Resiliency could and will be a strategic advantage that companies will start to look at.
There is still hope to actually get back down to something of a livable world if we get our act together.
Why do the biggest names in business choose Bloomberg Television?
That's a great question.
It's a very good question.
Interesting question. Good question. Great question.
I so appreciate that question.
You certainly ask interesting questions.
Bloomberg Television. Top experts, great questions. U.S. jobs numbers are released. Bloomberg has the report under surveillance with crucial data and expert analysis at terminal speed. Nobody covers Jobs Day like Bloomberg.
Moments away from the start of trading, this is Bloomberg Open Interest. I'm Matt Miller. We are looking at gains on futures after 3 days of losses in the cash trade. S&P futures up 0.2%. NASDAQ futures and Russell futures gaining about 0.1%. PCE came in today without raising any red flags that might slow the Fed down in its rate cutting cycle, expected to commence with cuts at, well, it already had a cut last meeting, next meeting, and the final meeting of the year. Pearson ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange, I guess, in from London. The stock is up. It's more than doubled in the last 5 years for this publisher, 25 years listed on the New York Stock Exchange. And then Global Citizen ringing the bell down at the NASDAQ marketplace. They will be hosting a concert in Central Park. I'll be attending tomorrow. Because I'm a big fan of Cardi B and Shakira.
Yeah, if there's one thing people say about Matt Miller, it's like he's Cardi B and Shakira's #1 fan.
Die hard.
Absolutely checks out.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, away from that, I'm looking at pharmaceutical stocks at the open this morning. They are all climbing. Pfizer a little bit less, 0.5%. Eli Lilly, Merck, those are up 1.5% and 1.2% respectively. It goes to who is building more in the U.S. because President Trump's 100% tariff on patented drug imports is weighing on things here. He will, though, allow for exemptions for companies that manufacture in the U.S. And again, Eli Lilly and Merck have been opening up plants and trying to do just that, Matt.
Yeah, so it looks like they've got a head start, and as a result, investors aren't terribly concerned. U.S.-based chip makers also climbing after the Wall Street Journal reported the Trump administration is weighing a new plan to reduce U.S. reliance on chips made overseas. It looks like the U.S. is going to require 1-to-1 chip content in manufacturers' products without triggering any big tariffs. So that could be a problem for Apple and others that get most of their chips from TSMC. We're back with Partners Group's Chief Investment Strategist of Private Wealth, Anastasia Amoroso, and this could be an issue, right? Although it looks like companies are finding a way to either be super nice and flattering to the president in order to get carve-outs? Or, I mean, what will companies that get almost all of their chips from Taiwan do when they're required to get some from the U.S.?
Right. I think what they'll do is future commitments. That's probably the quickest way to sort of alleviate the administration's concerns about the overly being reliant on foreign supply.
So over the next 5 years, we promise to spend $400 billion in the U.S.
I think that's the quickest way. But I will say, bigger picture, I think the companies are getting the memo from this administration, which is we do need to onshore certain capacity, which is considered to be mission critical for a lot of the industries. And certainly onshoring semiconductor capacity fits squarely into that. So whether it's current commitments, whether it's commitments to start, building out the factories in 2026 and beyond, I think that's the way you get around some of those most egregious tariff threats.
I know Matt promised we'd speak beyond AI and the amount of spending that they do. It is hard to do. But just one thing there that I can't get out of my head, and our Bloomberg News reporters had an excellent story about this, just the amount of times that these tech titans are tapping the bond market. Companies have raised about $157 billion so far in public bond markets. That's up 70% from what they issued in the same period last year. Should we be worried that tech as a sector is becoming increasingly more leveraged?
I mean, I think there's a distinction between larger cap companies and smaller cap companies. And for example, when you look at high grade, investment grade corporate, both debt ratios and sort of interest coverage ratios, they look very, very strong. If you look at the high yield market, you do see some weakening in the high yield market. So I think it depends on where the tech fits into that spectrum. But I will say for some of the larger cap tech companies, if they have cash on the balance sheet anyway, but they're able to take advantage of now lower interest rates and really near record tight spreads, I think that's exactly what they're doing.
I want to talk about whether we can hit new highs here, and everyone seems bullish. We have obviously been hitting record after record after record. I think the S&P has hit 28 new records this year, and President Trump says it's hit 48 new records this year, although that's not true. I wonder if we're not all already holding as many equities as we can. I mean, U.S. households are the most overweight that they've ever been by many measures. Foreign investors own 30% of this market. They're also the most overweight that they've been in data going back to 1945. Like, who else is left to buy?
All right. Well, I think there's the technical side of it, and there's also the fundamentals, which is, can the earnings continue? Can we be comfortable with the multiple that we pay? And so let me kind of answer that question, near term versus longer term. And near term, I do think we're bound for some sort of a bump in the road, for some sort of, consolidation, because we've come a long way in a short period of time. If you do look at some of the technical factors, we certainly overbought, and maybe it's the weaker or stronger than expected payrolls report next week. Maybe it's the start of the earnings season where the bar has actually been reset higher relative to other quarters where the bar is reset lower. Maybe something like that does cause a near-term consolidation. But having said that, we do look for another 2 rate cuts into the end of the year. So that's 75 basis points of monetary stimulus that will start to accrue. Danny, to your point, to some of the corporates that do have a lot of floating rate exposure, it'll start to accrue to the real estate market. And so I do suspect that will add stimulus into the economy going into 2026. By the way, on top of the tax cut stimulus that is still yet to come in 2026. So for those reasons, Matt, I do think the fundamentals into 2026 look strong. And, maybe you don't have this, huge momentum of buying, but if you have momentum of holding, that's solid as well.
It's a good way to describe it, but does the bond market play along? Because since the Fed's decision to cut rates last week, 10-year yields are up 14%. When that happened last year, everyone was decrying, okay, financial conditions are actually tightening as they're trying to cut. Are we headed for that again?
Look, I don't think so. I mean, the bond market, I think, reacted to economic data in the first half of the year that maybe was a little bit stronger than expected. But if you think about that, that is backwards-looking data. I think the most important thing right now to pay attention to is the labor market weakness that is clearly upon us. So I would assume that whether it's next week's labor market data, whether it's the actual rate cuts that materialize in November and December, I would assume that does cap yields in the bond market.
All right, Anastasia, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks so
Always
much.
a pleasure
Great
to see you. That is Partners Group's Anastasia Amoroso. All right, let's get a check on what your equity market is doing. About 7 minutes into your trading day, we are moving higher this morning, up by about 0.7%, not undoing the 3 days of losses, as Matt pointed out, the first time you've seen that in 3 years. We are looking at European equities, so we're just going to quickly change that to U.S. So maybe the change is going to look different. There we go. We still are up. We're up 0.5%. You see Microsoft, Tesla, Alphabet's, a lot of the Mag 7 moving us higher. I actually want to go to what's moving us lower because the second one on here is interesting. It is Costco. Wow. Costco is moving down 3.5%, despite the fact that they basically beat on all metrics. They also said that they're going to shift more towards value-oriented and more essentials. In the pre-market, it was slightly higher, but that's turned a leg lower. Maybe expectations were high. I don't really know how so, since shares have gained, I think, only like 3% so far this year. Yeah, Matt, you can fact check me on that if that is correct.
Well, you were pointing that out this morning.
Yeah.
They've done well over the last 5 years, but if you look over the last year, before the bell, they were only up 3%. So with this loss, Costco is actually negative for the year. They're still up with reinvested dividends, though. 190% over the past 5 years.
Well, at least they have that. But, Matt, it is maybe a head scratcher if it's a more value-oriented consumer. Why wouldn't Costco do better? And they also talked about tariff mitigation. Let's also look at the sectors, because most sectors are in the green this morning. Actually, all of them, save for one. It is Staples at the bottom. I mean, is that just Costco? Very possibly so, down 0.5%. At the top of the pile, it goes utilities, industries, energy. So it's very cyclical things that are leading us higher. And Infotech also near the bottom of the pile. But again, Matt, most sectors in the green as we head higher by about 0.5%.
By the way, if we have maybe value-oriented investors, which normally we don't, right? Maybe that's why they're shunning Costco.
Yeah, do value investors exist anymore?
It's still trading at 46 times next year's earnings, and NVIDIA trades at less than 40 times.
Yeah, that's punchy.
All right, coming up, investors are mostly shrugging off a 100% tariff on patented drugs. We'll discuss that with Bloomberg Intelligence senior analyst Sam Fazeli. This is Open Interest.
At what point do you say, we made a mistake and we're getting out? How long do you give it before you say, this isn't working?
That's one of the most critical differentiators between great investors and just mediocre investors. Because on one hand, you have to have confidence and conviction in all the work you've done, the decision you've made, that if you have a little stumble here and there, if you immediately are selling out, you're never really going to fully realize that the depth of potential long-term success. And yet on the other hand, if you're stubborn and you refuse to admit I'm wrong, you continue to think the market's wrong and I'm always right, then you'll get caught in some very, very difficult positions over time. So that ability to have a fresh perspective, take in the new information, even when things aren't going the way that you'd expected or to hope, and to really understand from this price point today, is this still going to be one of the most compelling investments or not?
Asia is at the forefront of some of the world's biggest stories. I'm Chevrian in Tokyo.
And I'm Heidi Stroud-Watts here in Sydney, where the trading day begins. We're here in the center of all the action to get you set up with the numbers, news, and knowledge you need for the day ahead.
The demand is indeed recovering.
We've been waiting for this moment.
The opportunity of a century.
Join us on Bloomberg The Asia Trade. Weekdays only on Bloomberg TV. Context changes everything.
Bringing you up to the minute economic news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Jennifer Zabasanja in Luanda, Angola, and this is Bloomberg.
Key investors, top executives, global innovators. Join me for in-depth conversations with the biggest newsmakers on the day's top stories. Insight with Haslinda Anand, only on Bloomberg.
Tune in to Bloomberg Business Week Daily.
We got to talk crypto.
From the magazine that helps global leaders stay ahead.
What's the conversation around your company?
Bringing you insight on the people, companies, and trends shaping today's complex economy.
Planning very big things.
A new level of premium.
Plus global business, finance, and tech news as it happens.
The floodgates of innovation are going to open up.
You can't fake passion. You either are or you aren't.
Bloomberg Business Week Daily, only on Bloomberg.
Snapping 3 days of losses thanks to PCE data that did not come in hotter, which was the fear for this market. So yields moved down, equities moved higher by 0.5% for the S&P, NASDAQ 1/3%, and the Russell 2000 also around 1/3%. Let's look at some of the top calls, though. Some of the analyst action that we are looking at. First up, Wall Street weighing in on those disappointing CarMax results from yesterday. Evercore ISI and Wedbush both downgrade the online car retailer. Shares of CarMax had plunged to a 5-year low yesterday after a significant miss on earnings and sales. It appeared that tariffs really had a pull forward effect, and that has waned out. Next up, Warner Brothers Discovery, that gets cut at KeyBank. The analysts over there citing uncertainties surrounding that potential Paramount Skydance deal. They also say the valuation looks stretched and the downside risk is high. Shares down 0.6% this morning. But in the run up to it, Warner Brothers Discovery has been on a tear since August. Shares up 53%. Finally, Tylenol maker Kenvue, that gets raised to a buy at Rothschild and Redbird. Shares have been down 20% this month on concerns over Trump's announcement that pregnant women shouldn't take acetaminophen, the active ingredient in Tylenol. The analyst, though, said that recent Health and Human Services proposals were less severe than feared, so those shares up 1.5%, Matt.
All right, so some of the upgrades and downgrades that we're seeing across the street. Coming up, the MSCI World Index is on pace to outperform the first time in almost a decade. It's truly monumental move, and we're going to talk about this with the chairman and CEO of MSCI next. We're happy to have Henry Fernandez here with us in the studio. This is Bloomberg Open Interest.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute political news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Tyler Kendall in Washington, and this is Bloomberg.
We're at the epicenter of a global realignment on a scale not seen for decades. At the intersection between markets, economics and geopolitics, a forum for sophisticated conversation. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Good morning, this is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. I'm Tom McKenzie in London. These are the stories that set your agenda.
Taking you from the U.S. markets close to the overnight session in Asia, we'll walk you through what you need to know to kickstart Europe's trading day. Live from our European headquarters, we bring you the day's top market-moving stories, unmatched expert analysis, and on-the-ground reporting from across the continent. Tune in to Daybreak Europe, only on Bloomberg Television. Context changes everything.
Bringing you up-to-the-minute energy news whenever and wherever it happens. I'm Joanna Bersecci in Vienna, and this is Bloomberg.
Well, S&P 500 returns have been solid this year. U.S. stocks have lagged other major stock markets. The S&P has underperformed benchmarks in Canada, Mexico, Brazil, Japan, and China. The MSCI World Index has advanced 15% this year and is on pace to outperform the S&P 500 for the first time since 2017. Joining us now is Henry Fernandez, Chairman and CEO of MSCI. Henry, thank you so much for joining. Yeah. And obviously, your business is steeped daily in what these markets are doing. If you told anyone that not just the U.S., but global equity markets would be hitting all-time highs, if you told someone that on April 2nd, I don't think they would have believed you. What do you just make of the overall health of markets today?
Well, for sure, they would not have believed it because a lot of people had been predicting a continuous strengthening of the dollar, for example. So a meaningful part of that outperformance of global markets is the weakness of the dollar, in addition to the local market rising. And across the world, a lot of markets were depressed. You know, we in the U.S. got used to this exuberant market, but in a lot of markets around the world, Europe, for example, China for a long time, even Japan, the markets were depressed. So you're now seeing a recovery and a catching up to the U.S., and on top of that, you have the currency.
So, I mean, your indexes are used by investors around the world as a benchmark, and I saw a stat this morning that I thought was pretty fascinating. Not only are European investors, or I should say foreign investors, heavily overweight U.S. stocks in their U.S. exposure, but in fact, of the $60 trillion in U.S. equities, almost 30% of that is held by foreign investors right now. So we have more foreign ownership of U.S. markets than we ever have. Why are they continuing to invest despite tariffs, despite President Trump? Is it maybe even because of those things?
Tech and AI.
I see.
And, you know, we are going through a major revolution, you know, in technology in the world. And there have been a lot of other market revolutions. You know, in the 1860s and 70s, railroads were, you know, the flavor of the day. And huge overcapacities was built in railroads, and then they crashed, and other people picked them up. So probably that's what we're going through here, is a massive investment.
Would you compare it to 1999 and 2000?
Probably, yeah. At this point, at some point, you know, all this investment, which is venture capital investing by definition, is not all going to pan out. So the companies that did good investments and benefit from are going to do well, but there will be a lot of them that won't, and therefore, you know, the markets are going to not be very kind to them at that time. But we're still going in that phase of discovery as to who are going to be the winners, who are going to be the losers. So since you don't know, you put it all across the market.
This is a market that's changed an incredible amount from the 90s, which is obvious. But I think one of the big glaring things that is often pointed out but forgotten is that the number of public companies since the 90s has shrunk by half. And there are other things that seem to be concerning about transparency. More companies are staying public, more are being taken private public. There are proposals from the president to allow companies not to report quarterly, but instead just do it twice a year. Your business is built on data and transparency. Is there a growing transparency problem right now?
In private markets, there is, for sure, because these are opaque markets, and that's the mission of MSCI right now. We're building what I call the MSCI of the private markets compared to public markets, which is you start with the data. You got to know what the fund is, what the fund does, you know, what are the companies, what do they invest in, Then you look at what is the benchmark of that fund relative to a market. And you say, what is the risk of that fund? What is the performance? So how does that compare to the public markets? Does that compare to other private market funds? So that's a major revolution that is taking place. We're leading that in creating that transparency in private credit, for example. But it's going to take time because what we have done in the public markets has been built for decades in terms of the norms, the standards, the data, the reports, the benchmarks, all of that. And we're trying to do that in a few years in the private market. So we're really busy, doing that. But that should be an incredible facilitator of more capital, particularly individual investor capital, going into these markets.
So what's the breakdown look like in your business in terms of investment and revenue? Because you've got a lot of shooting stars right now. You've got huge gains in foreign markets. You've got all of the AI and tech gains that you talked about. And then you've got this massive interest. I think 82% of fund managers want to be invested in private markets.
So we're very lucky that we have a lot of wind in our back in most markets. And therefore, we're catching all those trends in indexation, in risk management, in climate, in private markets, and all of that. We're very fortunate that we have a high profitability in the company, about 60% EBITDA margins, and we allow
60%.
60%. It allows us to reinvest back into the business, and at the same time, buy our shares back and be very generous with the capital with our shareholders. So we've developed. When I took the company public 18 years ago, it was $18 a share. We're $5.70 today, with a market cap of $45 billion, and we think that that's small compared to what we can be in the future.
In terms of parts of growing business, there's been a lot of buzz, or at least there was at the beginning of this year, about, to your point, of growing private capital, but private capital ETFs. Apollo and State Street developed one together. And since then, it's gone a little bit quiet. I think they're putting a second one out there. But when you talk to clients who want you to develop indices that they can track to turn into ETFs, is there still a lot of clamoring for private capital ETFs? And how feasible and possible is that?
Well, the first step was to put this private capital into mutual funds, the interval funds, as they're called, which it allows for liquidity to be happening every so often, but it's not daily or it's not real time. So that's kind of been the first step. There's some, including others, that have tried to jump directly into the ETF market directly.
Do they do too soon, do you think?
Yeah, it's hard because you need to, first of all, there's a mix, that, it's 85% fixed income, for example, public fixed income, and 15% private fixed income, private credit. The issue there is you cannot do that with that underlying liquidity of the private credit. So you can either have a market maker, give you that, or what we're working on is evaluated prices. So if you come up with evaluated prices in private credit, similarly to public fixed income, you're able to create a standard, well-trusted source of prices that people can value the NAV at, and you can trade the NAV. So that's, I think, the solution to that problem. In private credit, obviously, evaluated prices in real estate and in private equity may be more challenging, but that's the direction of travel.
Henry, great having you in here. Hope we can get you back soon. Henry Fernandez there is the CEO of MSCI. Let's dig in right now to President Trump's looming 100% tariff on drug manufacturers that they don't produce here in the U.S. Bloomberg Intelligence senior pharmaceutical analyst Sam Fazeli joins us now. And Sam, investors seem to shrug off this new announcement because a lot of drug makers already have started work on U.S. production facilities, right?
You got it, Matt. It's exactly what's happening here. At the end of the day, this is a 100% tariff that is written about in a short tweet or truth. I'm stuck with that tweet phrase. And I think the market realizes that most of these companies have already made their pledges, so we're looking good there. And in fact, there's no mention of most favored nation, so maybe we're not going to hear about that, although there's still room by the end of the month for that to happen.
Sam, only a minute here, but then who is at risk if all these U.S. manufacturers and even the likes of Novo Nordisk have started to try to build U.S. manufacturing?
Yeah, I mean, so obviously countries which are the base for a lot of these who've been used, they've been using before, such as Ireland and Switzerland, as a hub for manufacturing and shipping out. If they are going to be manufacturing everything in the US, so that takes a little bit of a hit. But of course, there's many other countries that you need to manufacture and ship to, and that's probably where they're going to be able to continue to do that.
All right, Sam, appreciate you jumping on with this story. Bloomberg Intelligence's Sam Fazeli, he covers pharma for us globally. Coming up in the next hour, Ethan Devitt joins us from Moneta on the possibility of a slower rate-cutting cycle.
Plus, we're going to hear from Egypt's foreign minister, who's going to be joining from the UN, and Fraser Yacht CEO talk about the demand for super yachts and how wonderful life is in Monaco. We're going to get all of that coming up next. You're watching Bloomberg Open Interest.
A cidade estava sitiada.
Nisso eu começo, eu não sabia o que fazer.
Foi a mais terrível que eu passei na minha vida.
Eu temo, né, que o Brasil se torne, num futuro próximo, um narco-estado.
Porque no final, tudo é dinheiro.
People back home there, they are suffering. And someone is driving a Range Rover with their money.
Where is my money?
I think she's a scam up to now.
It's some of the world's most desperate people who are getting ripped off.
Repeat after me. I am a winner.
I didn't know how big it was. I didn't really understand what I was getting myself into.
If you tell me you have a vision of being $1 billion business, then you're going to have to do what it takes. And if you're not going to do that, everybody's going to suffer.
Una batalla a muerte.
Money can do a lot of good. It can really transform people's lives, but it can also hurt them.
From the world of politics to the world of business, Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lines deliver news, insight, and analysis live 2 times a day, every trading day. Balance of Power at 1 and 5 Eastern, only on Bloomberg. It's a multi-trillion-dollar industry. We'll show you what's happening in ETFs like no one else. ETF IQ, only on Bloomberg.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by Progressive Insurance.
I'm Deborah Rodriguez.
A mix of boos and cheers as a defiant Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu took the podium to address a more than half-empty UN General Assembly today after many delegates walked out. He blasted member nations who support Palestinian statehood.
There's a familiar saying, when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Well, for many countries here, when the going got tough, you caved.
Netanyahu said his message was being broadcast on loudspeakers into Gaza.
Lay down your arms. Let my people go. Free the hostages. All of them. The whole 48. Free the hostages now.
He held up a map of the region titled The Curse. Former FBI Director James Comey and President Trump traded barbs on social media after the Justice Department indicted Comey on charges of obstruction and making a false statement when he denied leaking information to the press during Senate testimony 5 years ago. CBS News Face the Nation's Margaret Brennan.
Comey says he has faith in the justice system in terms of how this would play out. In other words, an indictment is not a conviction, and he seems to be very confident that that won't happen.
In his Instagram post, Comey said, "Bring on the trial." On Truth Social, President Trump called Comey a bad cop. Defense Secretary Hegseth summoned hundreds of generals and admirals from around the world to a meeting in Virginia next week. The Pentagon hasn't said why. Correspondent Charlie D'Agata.
A lot of questions here as to why the Secretary is meeting them in person rather than on like a secured video conference as in the past. Aside from security considerations of having all that brass in one place at one time, it's going to cost a lot of money to fly them in from all over the world.
Meteorologist Craig Allen is keeping tabs on a hurricane that formed this morning in the Caribbean.
Umberto should stay away from land areas even into the weekend, and as the track continues to bend a little bit more to the north and then eventually to the northeast, staying in between the United States and Bermuda.
The number of babies born with syphilis is still rising. CBS's Michael George.
New CDC data shows cases of the sexually transmitted infection, which can be passed from mothers to babies, are up nearly 700% since 2015. The data also shows other sexually transmitted infections are declining in the U.S., with experts crediting greater awareness and prevention tools.
Syphilis in newborns has been linked to lifelong issues like hearing loss. The Dow is up 358. This is CBS News. New research proves cameras in cars and trucks are saving lives.
Backup cameras help drivers see small children. University of Texas research shows a big drop in deaths and serious injuries since those cameras were required on vehicles.
We are doing an excellent job of recognizing severe and dangerous issues related to car safety.
Author Dr. Jeanette Jolly says more children could be protected if backup cameras were also installed on older vehicles. Jeff Gilbert, CBS News, Detroit.
Britain's Prince William looks back in next week's episode of Eugene Levy's Apple series, The Reluctant Traveler.
I'd say 2024 was the hardest year I've ever had. You know, life is sent to test us as well, and being able to overcome that is what makes us who we are.
That year included his wife Kate Middleton's cancer diagnosis and chemotherapy treatment. Deborah Rodriguez, CBS News.
This is Bloomberg Intelligence with Scarlett Fu and Paul Sweeney.
How do you think the Fed is looking at tariffs, the uncertainty of tariffs?
Let's take a look at the sectors and how they performed.
A lot of investors getting whipsawed every day by news events.
Breaking market headlines and corporate news from across the globe.
Could we see a market disruption, a market event?
Are people just too exuberant out there?
You see some so-called low-quality stocks driving this short-term rally.
Bloomberg Intelligence with Scarlett Fu and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio, YouTube, and Bloomberg Originals.
Good Friday morning from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York City to our worldwide audience. Also streaming live on YouTube. It's Scarlett Fu, Paul Sweeney, the Bloomberg Intelligence Program. A lot to do in the next couple of hours. We're going to check in with Joanne Shu, the University of Michigan. We had some of that data came out today. We're going to also have a simulcast with Bloomberg Television anchorperson Anne-Marie Hordern, speaking with the Egyptian Foreign Affairs Minister Jeffrey Cleveland. He's a chief economist over there at Payton & Regal. We'll get his thoughts about some of this economic data we are seeing today and throughout the week. Ethan Ranganathan, she covers all the media stuff for Bloomberg Intelligence. She's got some new research on the streaming business. It's Netflix, it's Disney, but how about if you put Paramount and Warner Brothers together? That would be a competitor. So we got a lot coming up in the next couple of hours. But right now, let's kick it all off with John Tucker and our Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, guys, this Bloomberg Business Flash brought to you by IBKR. Financial advisors switch to Interactive Brokers for lowest cost global trading and turnkey custody solutions. No ticket charges, no conflicts of your interest. Learn more at ibkr.com/RIA. I'm going to say today it's all about inflation and inflation expectations. The major stock averages are higher. S&P 500 up 25 points. The Dow up 267 points. And right now, the NASDAQ 119 points higher. Let's get right to the data that just crossed the University of Michigan. The headline, the sentiment indicator, 55.1, a little lower than last month, a little lower than expectations. Right to the inflation expectations, the one-year expectations coming in lower than expectations, 4.7. The expectations from economists surveyed by Bloomberg, 4.8. And then the 5-10-year inflation outlook coming in at 3.7%. Again, that was a little lower than the expectations, and that is helping give a boost to stocks. Earlier, we saw the personal consumption expenditures price index. When you strip out food and energy, that grew at a slower pace last month. All of this gives a little more breathing room for Fed policy makers. And right now, you have 10 of the 11 major industry groups in the S&P 500. They are higher, and energy a best performer as we see oil prices rise. West Texas, NYMEX up about 0.9%. And we check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Scarlett and Paul, happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you. And it feels like for the markets, this data was the green light to keep on adding to risk. All right, let's take a look at some of the stocks on the move here with the S&P 500 ending its recent slide, just a little bit of a slide, and bring in Bloomberg's Alexandra Semenova with our market drivers. Alexandra.
Hey guys, good morning. I've been watching shares of Oracle really closely as we get more updates on this closely watched TikTok deal with the U.S. in which it is supposed to be among a consortium of investors buying the company. The Trump administration said today that they expect a valuation of about $14 billion. That's actually well below what the expectations were, kind of disappointing investors. Investors say that a deal at that price would be a bargain for buyers, including Oracle and partner Silver Lake Management. And accordingly, the stock is down a little bit this morning, though I do have to say it has had a fantastic run this year. Obviously, we got that blowout earnings report where they really wowed investors with their guidance. And then also, of course, this involvement with TikTok. The stock is up about 74% this year.
Okay, what else you got for us here?
Also taking a look at shares of furniture retailers, which are taking a hit right now after President Trump announced that the U.S. will enact new tariffs, specifically on imported kitchen cabinets, on bathroom vanities, and other home products next week. RH is seeing its stock fall this morning. I see it down about 2.2%. Wayfair, another furniture retailer, also dropped. RH is one of the companies that's really been taking a hit from tariffs. Its CEO has been a critic of Trump's trade policy. It's had a really rough year. Basically, in a social media post on Thursday night, Trump said that these kinds of imported products have been flooding into the U.S. He said that a 50% tariff would go on cabinets, vanities, and associated products.
Yeah, you wonder if that's just kind of the initial shot, and of course everything's going to come down.
Everything gets walked back.
Yeah.
We saw that on the pharmaceuticals.
Yep.
If you have or thinking about building a plan here, you can be exempt.
Right, and so many companies are saying they've done just that.
We'll do it.
All right, let's talk about Boeing, which has been in the news this week.
Yeah, it is a bright spot today. The stock is up about 4.1% right now. The Federal Aviation Administration said that it will give it more leeway to perform some safety checks on its notorious 737 MAX plane prior to delivery. Obviously, they've struggled with safety issues after multiple crashes with that plane. The FAA will delegate more of its routine inspections to the plane maker, and they also asked for permission for more output on this plane. It's currently capped at about 38 a month, and they want to see it move to a rate of 42 by the end of this year. Investors are very happy with this announcement.
Yeah, that's what George Ferguson's been telling us. It's all about the free cash flow that's generated by those MAX 737s. So we appreciate that. Alex Semenova, thanks so much. Appreciate that. Alex Semenova, she does all the equity stuff for Bloomberg News. And for more conversations like this, subscribe to our new Stock Movers Reports. Listen for 5-minute audio reports on the biggest winners and losers in the stock market. Subscribe to Stock Movers on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you listen. As John was reporting earlier, got some University of Michigan sentiment data here. I don't know, a little smidge weaker on the margin. I don't know if you make a big deal about it. I don't. Joanne Shu, she is Surveys of Consumers Director at the University of Michigan. Joanne, talk to us about some of the sentiment data you guys have reported today.
Essentially, sentiment edged down just a bit from last month. It's not a dramatic decrease, but overall consumers' views continue to be quite subdued about the future of the economy. We're seeing this for all index components and across multiple dimensions of the economy.
What about inflation expectations? Because that's a big question here as we're looking for inflation to stabilize, but it still remains fairly sticky above that 3% mark. Excuse me, the 2% mark.
Inflation expectations for the short run ticked down just a little bit, but it still remains quite high, much higher than last year. For the long run, it ticked up just a little bit, lower than what we were seeing in April and May, but again, much higher than last year. We're seeing quite a bit of uncertainty over inflation. Consumers continue to be worried about tariffs, and this was before the announcement from yesterday of the extra tariffs that were being implemented. Consumers are still quite worried that tariffs are going to pass through to higher consumer prices in the future.
Joanne, we see the headline University of Michigan sentiment data came in at 55.1. Where would you like to see that? Where's a reading that would signify, hey, we're in good shape here?
We want to see several months of sustained improvements, and that's not what we've been seeing over the course of 2025. Over the course of this year, we've seen pretty dramatic declines, and then we've kind of been bouncing around in the 50s. This is not a strong reading, and for signs of confidence from consumers, we need to see an upward trend.
All right. Very good, Joanne Shu. Thank you so much. We appreciate that, Joanne Shu at the University of Michigan. So coming up, we're going to have a discussion. Anne-Marie Hordern, a Bloomberg television anchor with the Egypt Foreign Affairs Minister Badr Abdelati, talking about that part of the world. And it's been a United Nations week. It's been a busy week for world leaders here, even in New York City in particular.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen people come into the Bloomberg office. We've, of course, held the Bloomberg Global Forum where we got to speak with heads of state. Lots of pension fund guys running around because, they have to make their case to these government officials and kind of hear what the pattern is, what the trend is in terms of raising money.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, a busy week here in New York City with the United Nations General Assembly. A lot of news coming out of this week and a lot of government officials making their way. And we're going to talk to one right now. The Egyptian Foreign Affairs Minister Badr Abdelati speaking with Bloomberg television anchor Anne-Marie Hordern. Let's take a listen.
We welcome our viewers on television radio for this important conversation as we've seen a ton of dialogue happen around this UN General Assembly when it comes to the changing geopolitical landscape. And I'm now joined by Egypt's Foreign Minister, Badr Abdelati. Minister, thank you so much for joining Bloomberg.
Thank you so much for hosting me.
You were part of one of the most significant meetings to take place at this UN with President Trump and other Arab leaders. What did the president tell you about how the U.S. sees the path going in terms of ending this war in Gaza?
Well, I mean, it was a very, very encouraging meeting. It was positive, to hear from President Trump his commitment as a president of peace to end this ugly war on Gaza, this aggression, Israeli aggression against innocent people from our point of view. So this is very important and encouraging, and also to talk about no annexation, to talk about developing Gaza where people will stay on their own land, and even those who left their homeland, they are entitled to return back. Those are very encouraging signals, of course, and messages.
Did everyone leave with a sense of unity about what the path is? And what is Egypt's role going to be in terms of the reconstruction?
Well, we have a unified Arab and Muslim position. We are in full support to the vision and the plan of President Trump to bring an end to this unjust war against innocent people in Gaza. For us, we have our plan. It's an Arab-Muslim plan for early recovery and reconstructions of Gaza, and it's endorsed by the international community, including European Union, Japan, Norway, most African countries. And what next will be, as soon as we have a ceasefire, then we will move ahead with hosting an international conference in Cairo.
When will that be?
Yeah, well, as soon as we have a ceasefire. So we are talking about 2, 3, maximum 4 weeks from having a ceasefire to host it. And we will have 3 events. One will be dedicated for private sector, for talking about security arrangement in Gaza, governance of Gaza, who will govern
Blair,
Gaza.
the former prime minister? Do you think he could be like the governor of this authority?
No. I mean, we are talking about Palestinian ownership. Of course, they have to govern themselves.
But what do you make of that idea that's being floated in the press?
Well, again, I'm talking about the Arab Islamic vision and the plan. We are talking about security arrangement. We are training, providing training of Palestinian policemen. We are accepting deployment of international forces within specific parameters. And above all, the governance of Gaza will be entrusted to a Palestinian administrative committee consists of 15 persons, all technocrats, all from Gaza Strip, and they will run Gaza for a transitional period of time till we manage to empower the Palestinian Authority to ensure the unity between Gaza and the West Bank.
Following the strike from Israel on Doha, what is the dialogue right now in terms of getting the hostages out and the ceasefire you're talking about? What is Hamas's latest deal that they decided to put on the table? Are they even there?
Well, first of all, you know, whenever we are reaching the moment of truth to conclude a deal which securing the life of the hostages, you know, the Israelis are intervening to destroy all those efforts, and this happened 100 times.
What about Hamas also intervening and destroying
Hamas,
efforts?
they accepted, you know, the deal of Witkoff, the proposal of Witkoff on August 18th, and we had a deal and everything was perfect, but it was the Israelis who backed off. We said, no, we will not accept that. So, I mean, we need a political will. We need a seriousness from the Israeli side.
Just a few weeks ago at the Arab Summit, President Sisi called Israel an enemy.
No, this is not true at all.
I read the translation.
No.
The transcript.
Go to the original
So what did he
speech.
say? How do you characterize this relationship?
He said that, you know, we have to work together in the area between, stretching from the Gulf till the ocean. We want peace. It's a strategic option. And, of course, we have to deal with all hostilities with any enemy without specifying. Of course, we have different enemies in the region, but for Israel is, we have a peace treaty with Israel, and we are honoring our commitment, and of course, we have peaceful relationship with Israel. Of course, there are ups and downs because of the Israeli aggressions on Gaza, and that's is a main element of instability in our region. But at the end, We have peace with Israel, and we are honoring our commitment as long as Israel is honoring its commitment according to the peace treaty of 1979.
So it wasn't his intention to say Israel's an enemy, but do you think the 1979
no.
peace treaty is at risk? There's been tons of acrimonious statements between the Israeli and Egyptian press.
Well, I mean, you can, of course, focus on the official discourse in Egypt. Of course, our discourse is focusing on Israel and a country with whom we have our peace treaty. Of course, the Israelis are spreading out allegations that there are military buildup in Sinai, and this is not true. This is nonsense. All movement of Egyptian troops or equipments in Sinai were conducted based upon an agreement with the Israelis during the period of the surge of terrorism in Sinai between 2011 till 2015. So everything was in full cooperation with them, with their consent.
But what do you say to those who think there's real chance of war between your two countries?
No, again, we have peace treaty. This is the main pillar of stability, of peace in our neighborhood, and we are fully committed to our peace treaty. Again, yesterday or the day before, President Sisi spoke openly, I mean, with the government that peace is a strategic option for Egypt, and we are abiding by our commitments as long as the other side is, the Israelis are honoring their commitments.
You mentioned Sinai. For the Palestinian people, this is a real humanitarian crisis. If vulnerable people want to come into Sinai, should Egypt let them in?
Come on, you know, let us be serious. There is no what's so-called voluntary displacement or forced displacement. Displacement is displacement. The Israeli intention is to eradicate people from their homeland.
But I'm talking about the Palestinian people. If they want to flee on their own volition because they are nervous, should they not be allowed in?
If those will leave their own homeland, they will not be entitled to go back, and that would be the liquidation of the Palestinian cause, and we will not allow this to happen. If you are making life miserable, unbearable, if you are starving people, if you have a man-made famine and starvation, if you are killing people systematically on a daily basis, this is not a voluntary displacement. You are pushing people out of their homeland, and this is not acceptable. It's in clear violation to the Geneva Convention, to all norms. Why? There is no ethical or logical or legal basis for pushing people from their homeland. By making life miserable, you are pushing people outside their land.
Mr. Abdelati, thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to the conference Egypt will be holding after there is potentially some ceasefire. That was, of course, Egypt's foreign minister. I'll send things back to you.
All right, very good. That was Egypt's foreign minister of foreign affairs, Minister Badr Abdelati, speaking with Bloomberg television anchor Anne-Marie Hordern. All right, let's get a check back on those markets. We go to John Tucker for a Bloomberg Business Flash. John.
All right, we're mixed right now, the major averages, and the theme today seems to be inflation. We got a lot of indications that inflation had moderated, or at least not increasing, as some had feared. The S&P 500 right now, 11 points higher. That's up 0.2%, 66.16. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 186 points right now. That's up 0.4%. NASDAQ 100, that's the outlier, the tech-heavy NASDAQ, 41 points lower right now. That is down about 0.2%. In the meantime, John Stolfus at Oppenheimer says, you know what, the current environment does point to more gains for stocks.
The overall effect, we think, is a broadening of the market rally that we have seen. It looks persistent. It still is led by tech, because that's where the earnings are, or perceived to be, going forward at a stronger rate.
Earlier today, we got the personal consumption expenditures price index. When you strip out food and energy, this is one of the preferred measures of inflation for the Federal Reserve policymakers. That grew at a slower pace last month. So again, giving some breathing room to the policymakers at the Fed. The more policy reactive two-year yield unchanged, 365 right now. The 10 unchanged at 417. And the $14 billion price tag proposed for TikTok's U.S. business, that is being valued relatively cheaply. So
huge. I mean, it's social media. It's massive, and it's being valued, I think, like just over 1.5 times sales.
So this presents a bargain for the suitors like Oracle at this point. So we'll see what happens. Also, they're partnering with Silver Lake Management among the possible beneficiaries. One of the stories we're following for you today on the Bloomberg. We check the markets for you all day long right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker, and that is your Bloomberg Business Flash, Scarlett and Paul.
All right, we're going to dig into the outrage over the valuation of TikTok a little bit later on, but let's go from the micro to the macro and talk about the data that came out today. Jeffrey Cleveland is chief economist at Payden and Regal, and he joins us now from Los Angeles. And Jeffrey, reflect on the data we got today. Personal spending rising more than expected, tame but sticky inflation, all in the context of that stronger than expected second quarter GDP read that we got yesterday. Is the market right to price in rate cuts in October and December?
We think so. We think we're still on track for rate cuts. The reason why is inflation. We expect inflation to moderate a bit through year end. So that core PCE figure that you mentioned this morning, for August, it was up just 0.2, which keeps us on track. We think by year end, core PCE on a year basis will be 2.6. So we'll moderate a bit from the current reading of 2.9. So I think that alone keeps the door open for rate cuts. And I think it's good news for markets because it would be rate cuts happening not because of some economic calamity, but because inflation continues to moderate. So more of your soft landing vibes rather than your recession vibes would be the story there. And I think, the consumer spending numbers this morning, then the data that we saw yesterday for Q2, we see a very resilient consumer despite all the shocks that have been thrown its way so far this year. So good news overall.
And Jeffrey, I mean, you economists actually got it on the nose here today on this PCE data. Pretty much everything came kind of right in line with expectations here. What is your broad takeaway about kind of the inflation environment?
Well, that won't happen again, probably, right? Economists getting it right. Yeah, so if you look at the data in a little more detail, Paul, you see that goods were a bit of a drag on the month. So maybe the tariff story has already played out. Maybe the tariffs are not feeding through into consumer prices as much. I think there's a few different stories you can tell there, but the worst fears or the big fears on tariff-driven inflation really haven't panned out. And then going forward, we're optimistic that we'll get help in two areas, which will help inflation moderate. So on non-housing services, those prices should continue to cool off along with the labor market. And then housing. Housing, has been a big contributor to core inflation the last few years. It's a sticky metric in the government data, and we think that will continue to fade out over the next 12 months. We saw that. We think we're going to see that in the CPI, but also in the PCE. And so overall, that should help bring core inflation lower, on the next 6 to 12 month basis. So we're inflation doves, if you will.
Yet you look at what's going on when it comes to consumer sentiment, and there are signs of perhaps not everything as well. The latest University of Michigan sentiment declining to 55.1, and I know we're talking about really small amounts here, but consumers don't necessarily feel more encouraged as of late. How do you balance that with what we're seeing in the macro data?
Well, I'm not surprised given all the headlines that consumers have to face, right? So you've got everything from tariffs to potential layoffs, weakness in the labor market, all kinds of economic policy shifts, backtracking. So things of that nature, I think, weigh on the consumer. But we always say at Payden, watch what the consumer does, not what the consumer says. So consumer sentiment surveys are not that valuable for us. And I think that's played out through Q2 and data we've seen and into August in consumer spending as well. The consumer continues to spend. Why might that be? Well, when we look at aggregate income growth, we always talk about that. It continues to grow in nominal terms, Scarlett, like at a 4 to 5% clip. So the bottom line is if the consumer has income growth, the American consumer will find a way to spend. And that's been true despite all the shocks that I think are weighing on sentiment indicators.
Yeah, the consumer spends when we're not feeling good. The consumer spends when we're feeling good. We're just spending, right, Paul?
As long as they have jobs here. Red headline crossing the Bloomberg terminal. ByteDance to get about 50% of TikTok U.S. profit under Trump deal. That's interesting. We'll have more reporting on that, but that may explain why some of this valuation talk is making a little bit more sense here now. Jeffrey, one last thing here. The labor market, lots of different ways to look at it. How are you thinking about it?
I think the labor market has clearly softened. I mean, we look at the payroll survey to us. Bond market nerds is one of the most, obviously high frequency, but high quality data points that we can look at. So the fact that the 3-month average of non-farm payrolls has slowed to 29,000, that really gets our attention. It's a concern. Rarely do you slow, that much. And outside of a recession, it's happened a couple times, mid 60s and mid 1990s. So maybe this is a mid-1990s scenario, and we'll see things pick back up. Other similarities would be the tech investment that we are seeing. Our chart of the week this week, Paul, we looked at the tech as a share of growth, and it's about 40% of growth in the GDP accounts in the last 4 quarters. So that's keeping the story going despite our concerns on the labor market side.
Jeffrey, thanks so much. Always appreciate your analysis. Jeffrey Cleveland, Chief Economist for Payton and Regal out there in LA, joining us via that Zoom thing here. In the world of the big media companies, what's left of them, the latest deal kind of out there in the works, potentially in terms of just kind of in the zeitgeist, as Tom Keene would say, is Paramount and Warner Brothers to Discovery. Should those companies get together to compete better against Disney, Netflix, and maybe even some of the technology companies? Well, Geetha Ranganathan, she is our go-to voice on all things in the global media business. She's a senior media analyst at Bloomberg Intelligence. She's out with some research saying, hey, let's think about this streaming business. What would happen if you did put Paramount and Warner Brothers Discovery together? What would that mean from a streaming perspective? Geetha, what's your research show here?
Yeah, thanks so much, Paul. I think the combination obviously makes a ton of strategic sense, obviously, but also a lot of economic sense. And we ran some numbers, and what we're seeing is putting together those two businesses. I mean, Paramount is by definitely a subscale player in the streaming space. I would argue that maybe HBO Max is definitely in a better position. But again, you look at the number of subscribers, about 125 million. You put those two together, however, you do get 200 million subscribers. So they're already ahead of Disney. Still a little bit of a far cry from Netflix. But it's not just subscriber numbers that matter anymore, Paul. It's also the profitability. And Warner Brothers Discovery is actually already on this path. They've turned very profitable. And if you just run some of those numbers out, going out to about 2027, we find that the two businesses combined can generate about $8 billion in EBITDA, which would be almost double of what Disney would generate in that time frame. So really, I mean, it puts, I think, the combination puts, the streaming business definitely on steroids, if you will, makes a ton of sense.
Makes a ton of economic sense, a ton of business sense. Does it make sense for David Zaslav to be sold to Paramount?
I think so. I think ultimately it's obviously, Scarlett, it's going to come down to price. It's going to come down to a few different things. So remember, they do have a split that they were planning to do by the middle of 2026. What David Zaslav and the board really have to think now is if Paramount does come up with a bid, which is for the entire company, does it make sense to sell to them or wait, go ahead with the split and then really hope to kind of play up the value of those assets? So I think that is really the biggest question for the Discovery management team right now.
What do we know about the big investors in both of these companies? Do they want a deal to happen, Geetha? I mean, is this something that, because I agree with your research, it makes sense that there could be a real benefits here to putting these two companies together, which isn't always the case, particularly in media mergers.
Yeah, so it's surprising, Paul. I think everybody wants a deal, whether it's, the Paramount investors, whether it's the Warner Brothers Discovery investors. And if you just kind of look at the run up in the stock, so about 2 weeks ago, we got, this news piece suggesting that, Paramount was looking at Warner Brothers very seriously. Paramount stock after that news broke is up 30%. So obviously, people are kind of looking at Paramount, having some serious media ambitions. I think this really gives them strategic direction. This really kind of puts them on the media map. And of course, Warner Brothers Discovery is up over 60%, just as those kind of assets. I mean, these are undoubtedly, Paul, these are, and you will definitely agree with me, these are once in a generation assets. I mean, these are the crown jewels in the media space. So everybody obviously has to look at them, and Zaslav is absolutely going to leverage that the best he can.
All right, Geetha Ranganathan, thank you so much. Bloomberg Intelligence U.S. media analyst joining us from Princeton. And Paul, there's another story that I noticed about YouTube. TV subscribers may lose access to Comcast, NBC, Universal Networks. It's like they're the new cable operator.
Yeah, it feels like just like those negotiations they used to have and those disagreements they used to have between the programmers and the cable distributors, whether that's Comcast or Charter. Now the distributor is YouTube. It's the internet, and if it's the same kind of situation. If I'm, a programmer, I want to get paid as much as I can. If I'm the distributor, in this case YouTube, I want to pay as little as I
Absolutely.
can. So somewhere in the middle, hopefully there'll be a deal
And
there.
possible blackout for consumers.
Yep, that's what we always hear. Yep. So, all right, we'll stay on top of that news. Looking at the markets here, not a whole lot happening here. The S&P's up 4 points, the Dow's up 130 points, and the NASDAQ is down 69 points. We're going to have more coming up. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Berarti jadi materi apa? agak tamak gitu. Gue aja mentoknya gitu. Gue 10M sebulan gue nyans.
Iyalah anjing. Enggak, gue enggak ada. Mau ngapain lagi kayaknya?
10M sebulan gue udah bukan kayak, "Weh, anjing lu gini-gini." Enggak.
Lu udah diam aja ya?
Iya deh, gue anjing gitu kan. Iya, gue emproy, enggak apa-apa. 10M sebulan gue nyantai sih.
Anjing.
Jadi di umur kalian yang muda ini, kalian udah nyentuh angka 1M belum? Jawab jujur.
Gue belum.
Menurut gue bohong sih, itu bohong sih.
Gue belum anjing.
Lu berarti udah, jadi gimana rasanya menyentuh 1M?
Gue lagi proses.
Oh, proses saya lah. Tipu aku demi.
Enggak, gue tipe orang yang kalau misalnya beli di H&M masih nyesek.
Bohong ah.
Masih nyesek gue.
Lu ada fase OKB nggak nih kalian berdua? Pasti ada lah.
Ada lah.
Apa fase OKB nih waktu yang kalian rasain drastis banget kan, waktu perut lapar saldo 0 sama memegang uang dikit kan langsung kerasa perbedaannya kan?
Gue beli sepatu.
Oh, sepatu lu?
Iya, gue kalau beli sepatu, anjing sepatu berapa sih? Ya gitu. Anjing.
Sepatunya apa aja?
Kemarin baru beli apa ya? Onitsuka Tiger yang dari
Onitsuka Tiger.
Ya, itu masih.
Gue jujur, ini controversial take ya.
Oke.
Gak tau, mungkin gue udah mulai jadi om-om ya, tapi gue ngeliat sekarang Jordans gitu-gitu, menurut gue jamsui parah. Gue jamsui.
Sepatu
jamet gitu. Gue nggak bisa, gue udah nggak tertarik.
Gue nggak ada Jordan lagi.
Gue nggak tertarik lagi pakai sneakers gitu, men. Gue mau kayak pakai sepatu. Gue mendingan malah beli Lacoste dibanding gue beli Air Force One misalnya gitu, sepatu Lacoste. Padahal lebih murah, misalnya Lacoste.
Nih, di peta aja nggak ke-detect guys pintunya guys. Bang Erdi nanya Bang Erdi aja guys. Guys nanya Bang Erdi udah berada di Sustain bocil cuy. Ada garis panahnya di burung, what the fuck? Garis panah ini. Oh iya benar. Lewat kanan berarti lewat tengah coy. Siapa tadi yang bilang lewat kiri? Bikin gue bingung aja. Nah, elah bocil lewat kiri. Siapa sih yang dari tadi ngomong lewat kiri? Story. Nice. Yes. Ngel, lu yang ngel, kocak banyak yang bilang lewat kiri bikin gue bingung. Taruh story lu guys. Anjir berantem lagi, ini goloknya ambil gak sih? Oke, tatar gue terasa sabar. Gila, ayah dibentak-bentak gitu loh. What the fuck? Ayah macam apa yang melemparkan pisau ke anaknya? Oh shit man. Shit, bener-bener broken home dia guys. Oke udah semua nih berarti ya. Cabut ya. Lah. Ya gue udah dapat semua ininya guys. Artinya ya itu guys. Nggak mau gue lawan gituan. Artinya ayahnya tuh bener-bener, aduh gitu lah pokoknya. Susah dijelasin ya. Taruh gue mau jualan lu guys. Kuzuti itu buat apa sih Kuzuti? Oh nggak perlu lah. Ini apa? Wah ini OP sih, Divine Water OP sih. Save dulu. Intinya adalah I love you full. Oke, puzzle. Ya elah tinggal tuker-tuker doang, apa susahnya nih guys? Sebentar, saya baca dulu ya. Oke. Jadi ada yang ini. Ya ini mah gampang banget, cuy. Oke. Paham. Ya, surga. Oke. Bunga, Fox. Ya. Ini gambar apa sih? Ntar dulu ya. Tas di mana emang tas? Ke-skip guys, tas. Ada pedang dan juga musang yang berantem untuk sebuah kulit, ya. Surga menyaksikan berantem mereka. Kayaknya ini udah bener deh, tinggal tukerin aja deh. Oh, bisa diputer, coy, bisa diputer, bre. Nah, itu dari tadi kayak diputer. Kok ini kosong ya tapi ya? Tunggu, diputer nggak membantu-bantu banget ya. Sebentar, surga burung. Emang iya ada tas di dapur, guys? Oh, gue tahu kayaknya deh. Oh, itu musang. We need musang, guys. Musang bertarung dengan pedang. Oh itu musang, iya. Anjing, gue kira gambar cakar tuh musang guys dari tadi guys. Gue kira kayak cakar loh. Oke, musang pedang ya. Pedang bertarung dengan musang. Tapi taruhnya di kiri kanan apa bawah ya? Oh, timbangan. Hari demi hari bunga mawar di belakang musang dan di belakang pedang. Bisa juga nih. Guys, lihat kan di live chat bocil-bocil beda semua jawabannya. Asbun semua, nggak ada petunjuk, asbun semua. Sotoy semua anjing. Rubaban bukan musang. Taruh lah. Gue disesatin mulu sama kalian. Asal sebut semua. Anjim. Sebentar dulu. Day after day. The scale. Scale itu timbangan guys. Scale. Kayaknya urutannya dari sini sih ini ya. Nih bait satu kiri. Ya bait satu kiri. Tapi begini kali ya? Nah, muter gini. Timbangan jadi saksi. Oh. Salah juga ya. Apa Gunanya kosong ya? Burung kayaknya ada hubungan sama burung dah. Sebentar ya. Hari demi hari sunrise behind the fox back. Gua ngerti. Sunrise behind foxback itu artinya membelakangi, and set behind the sword. Oke. Ini sunrise nih kayaknya. Ini sunrise nih. Ini sunrise ya. Oke, itu kosong. Ini burung. Nggak ada hubungannya sama burung ya. Hari demi